Hey there, welcome to the Game Artist Podcast. My name is Ryan Kingsline. I am the founder of the Game Art Institute, where we train artists for the career of their lives. In this podcast, we interview amazing game artists to see what makes them tick and see how they got where they are today. So sit back, relax. I look forward to sharing their journey with you. All right, here we go. Brandon, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely.
All right, now you're in a conference room, so you're not demoing or anything like that. We're just going to have a conversation.
Perfect.
So I've got some people here live with me, so we may get some questions here at the end, but otherwise, I think the key thing for me is to, I've got a ton of students and I got a ton of people that are interested in environment arts and all of that. And this is something you've absolutely, you've been doing this for how long?
Oh, shit, like 2006, so 12 years now.
Wow. That's about...
I'm elder, dude. I'm elder, but I'm really young at heart, so I'm in touch with the younger audience. I work with some younger people, so my meme game is very weak, but we're good, though. We're good.
Good, yeah. I know I was looking at some of my old posts online, and I think the oldest was like 2006, so it's like, man, that's 12 years,
Still doing it, though.
Still doing it. So what do you do now? Because you're at Riot Games.
Yeah.
And this is very different than what you were doing before, which was at Giant Sparrow, I think.
Yeah, Sparrow. I was art directing. I was making art. I was doing everything. We have a very small team. It was me and really like three other artists, one 2D and then two 3D artists, running the whole show, making all the art for the whole game. And so now over at Riot, big giant company with thousands of employees, and now I'm on a little secret special team, cranking out some new stuff. And still making art, still doing environments and stuff like that. Just a lot more hands-on. I get to throw on the headphones and jam out and crank out art all day and work with art directors and the powers that be and things of that nature. So
I was reading in one of your other interviews about how for you it's incredibly important to be making art. Like you want to be in the trenches working.
I do. The meetings and the politics and things of that nature are just not something that I really enjoy. I can do it if need be, but it's not where I want to be. I'd rather be modeling and texturing and set decking, lighting, and doing all the fun stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Now, does then that keep you working, learning new tools, and busting your hump a bit?
I would love to say yes, but in all honesty, I am a little bit behind the curve of the hip new kids that are coming out of school these days. They got the substance, painter, designer, everything integrated in Unreal, workflow, blah, 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 all that stuff. I can do the painter stuff. I don't do it all day, every day, so I'm not as up to par with it. But over here at Riot, you've seen League of Legends, and the style of environment there is very hand-painted, very painterly stuff. So there's a big reason why I wanted to hop over to Riot, was to kind of diversify the tool set of my repertoire and try to dive into the more hand painted stuff and the things that Riot has been known for.
Yeah, I was looking like Molly's Room or even the stuff that you were doing. I think it was the Edith Finch. All of it's realism.
It is. It's realism, and it's funny. The concept artist that was at Sparrow when I joined, his name's Theo Aredos, and he's now working with me here at Riot on the project that we're on together. And he has a very, very distinctive conceptual style that is very painterly, very loose. He plays with light and bounce light and things of that nature to a fantastic degree. And on Finch, it was kind of like coming from Call of Duty, going to Finch, we needed to reboot the entire pipeline. We needed to make all the art for the entire game from scratch. We needed to do it all over again, basically. And it was me and two other artists to do this whole fucking thing. And I was like, how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to do this by going to tried and true, quick modeling, quick unwraps, quick textures. Can't spend 2 days on one prop. We still did bake out normals and did the traditional workflow for props and assets. It's just we couldn't spend as much love on all the little nitty-gritty details that you would put into AAA titles. So with that, I was hoping to cater more towards a little bit of a painterly style, but it never works out that way. I don't know. It was a challenge. It was a challenge. The artistic stylization and direction for Finch really kind of, in my opinion, came from the colors and the color palettes of the rooms, and kind of trying to dissect each person of each room into their own little story and their own storytelling within the environment.
And how much of the lighting and the color are you responsible for
Oh,
as an
yeah, all of it,
environmentalist?
100% all of it. On Finch, it was because the way that it worked there, it was me, Greg Pryor, 3D artist, Corey Davis, the other 3D artist. They were primarily making props and textures while I was building out the house, building the floors, building the rooms, the walls, building the textures, mapping everything, getting everything set decked into the room, placed just right, and then doing all the lighting as well. So my primary responses were of like the higher level of getting all that stuff in there and getting it to look good, while I was just constantly feeding the other two environment artists, which is prop after prop after prop, and getting them stockpiled with props so that we can deck out that house the way that it was. A lot of props in there.
Yeah, you were making the props so that they could assemble the scenes, or
No,
you
I'm
were
sorry.
giving them.
They were primarily making the props, and then I was doing all the set decking and the lighting and
Got it.
texture work and all that good stuff.
And what do you assembling these in? What software?
So Finch was all done in Unreal 4.
Okay.
I believe we're patch like 412 or 413 or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Unreal pretty much out the box. We had a couple engineers that would tweak out the engine a little bit for the different mechanics and stuff that we needed. But yeah, pretty much nothing too crazy. Unreal, and then Maya for modeling, quick unwraps and bakes. In I still use XNormal. I think everyone on the team was using XNormal, and then
Mm-hmm.
painting up our textures in Photoshop, and then Unreal for the engine.
Great. And when you're putting them together in Photoshop, is this like texture bashing, hand painting? How's that
There's a
working?
little bit of photo bashing. We definitely had a good folder of kind of like base materials. That was
Yeah.
kind of the way that I was always brought up in texturing from the COD days. Was kind of, you have your base woods, base metals, base tiling library that you
Right.
kind of use as your background to slap on, and then we were overlaying our AO maps, overlaying cavity maps, dropping the opacity of those down a little bit, and then I did actually come up with Quixel Suite's Endu and Dedu. I
Hmm.
came up with a little bit of a workflow where we could bake using a preset that I had created that kind of gave a little bit of a stylized preset that would kind of feather away some of the edges so you wouldn't get that super procedural look. And basically, whenever anyone that made a prop, we would run it through these Endu filter presets, and you'd get about 60% of the way there. Once you overlay your base material, boom, you're kind of like, 60, 75% there. The rest is just in the quick little fine tuning, painting, and details and stuff like that.
Cool. But and Kyle, who's here with us live, he's asking a question I want to get to here in a second about how you establish the mood of the rooms and all that, because
Hmm.
it's, as Kyle says, very effective. But before we get there, I noticed in your background you actually were a map painter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Over at Blizzard and Disney. So it's funny. I started when I was in school. I was doing primarily like CG renders, high
Okay.
poly stuff with
Yeah.
no texture resolution limits, that kind of stuff. Using V-Ray to actually I used Brazil back in school because V-Ray was just barely coming out, and then hopped on to V-Ray, and then I went into my first gig was at LucasArts, game industry stuff, and so that was really where I learned all the tricks and trade of game art creation. They didn't really teach us that at school in Otis back then. It was primarily just modeling, texturing, and lighting. So a lot of the learning that I did was happening on early my first year right out of school at LucasArts. Thank God, Gilbert Martinez, fantastic environment artist that he graduated from Otis 2 years before me, so he kind of took me under his wing and was like, "Yo, what are you doing? You're just planar mapping that prop and painting the texture. No, you got to unwrap it, you got to unfold it, and lay out all the UVs everywhere." I'm like, "What?" I had no idea that that's how you're supposed to do props and assets for video games. So yeah, a lot of learning quick, but that being said, it was fantastic, and I could not speak more highly than the team of people that I worked with, and how everybody was so welcoming, so together with helping one another out and leveling everybody up so that everything was looking good, especially us juniors. There was me and there's this other kid. His name is Brian Rechtenwald, and he's over at Naughty Dog now, but we actually started same day. We graduated school same time and same project, same everything. He's a phenomenal artist, but we basically kind of started same day, same path. And yeah, together we learn, we bounce ideas off each other. It was great. sorry, to come full circle to your question about the map painting stuff. After all that, went over to Disney, and in Disney they hired me in the art department to do some modeling for their feature films.
Uh-huh.
And after modeling a couple things, I was like, you want me to texture this stuff? And they're like, no, we got a surfacing department that textures everything. I was like, oh, that sucks, because I really like texturing too. And a little bit after that, they said, well, maybe moving you over to the art department working with matte painting might be up your alley, since you like to light and you like to texture and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And moved me over there and sat with Chris Stosky. He was the matte painting lead at the time. And he kind of brought me under his wing and showed me and taught me about how matte painting works for feature film. He was coming from ILM, and yeah, I got the whole rundown on how to, from laying out shots, setting up your cameras, setting up your projection cameras, lighting everything, quick textures, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and that was a fantastic learning opportunity. And then from there to Blizzard doing more matte painting stuff, working on Diablo, and worked on some WoW stuff, worked on a little StarCraft stuff in the matte painting department over there. Over there, I was primarily doing like a lot of CG scene setup, a lot of lighting, a lot of material stuff, a lot of rendering, and then I was sitting with a couple matte painters, Fabio Zengro, and I would pass off the matte painting to him in layers. He would paint up the layers, pass it back, reproject it, render it out, things like that. So
I was reading in one of your interviews that you never really thought of yourself as like a kick-ass student, but back then there just weren't a lot of people doing this, so it was a little bit easier. I remember those days a bit too myself, and do you think those rules still kind of apply, or is it a different deal now?
I think nowadays students in school have the resources and enough, number one, documentary out there on the internet, tutorials and such, to be
Yeah.
able to just be standalone. And I mean, school is invaluable. Your peers and the people around you, as long as you don't burn bridges, will be able to get you far in life, just by networking. And when everyone graduates, people get out there, you stay friends with all these people, and it's very easy to see what's going on. However, without school, just doing the straight online thing, the tutorial stuff, grinding it out at home, is another possibility. I think either way is a solid path. It's just how hard you try, really.
So along those lines, is there any one thing that makes a difference over another? And essentially what I'm leading with this is, you've got I'm looking here at your art station, and there's like a ton of assembled scenes,
Mm.
great lighting. So I have a ton of students that this is essentially what they want to be doing. They want to be establishing this, but devil's in the detail. There's a lot of ways to get lost, and you can spend a lot of time on a prop. So that rocking horse could take multiple weeks depending on how
Yep.
you implement that. Is there any one thing that really helps somebody achieve success as an environment artist over another?
I'd say first step is to look at your personality type and see what kind of person you are. If you are the type of person that just gets lost in the details and will sit there and ZBrush, a button on a shirt for an hour, then catering your portfolio towards that single piece, or those two or three pieces of unbelievably detailed, rendered, textured assets, is going to be your way to go, because that's your strength and that's what you love to do. I'm assuming, if you're spending an hour on a button. And
Right.
having three or four just kick-ass, super, super high quality, high detail, high everything pieces, do it. If you're one of those big idea picture persons that can start with a concept, a sketch, you can block it out in Engine, and you can do all that stuff, do quick lighting pass. If you can get that quick conceptual idea out into the Engine in a
Mm-hmm.
day,
Yeah.
then you're not that noodler, and then you're more of a person that can actually finish an environment and finish a scene. It's just going about it in the right way and making your checklist, hitting your checklist, giving yourself dates and time frames to be able to move on. Because like you said, and I'm sure is what you're alluding to, is that a lot of people will start with a big environment piece that they want to do,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
they'll wind up spending a week on one bush that gets duped, 15, 20 times, but you got a shit hot looking bush with a bunch of crap looking other things around it.
Yeah.
And that,
And so is the dilemma, is the answer to kind of just grind on the props, or is there a trick? If you're focused on the overall picture, like
yep.
your primary focus isn't, hey, I'm going to be a prop artist, but I want to make environments. So is there a trick getting this done?
There is a trick. And the trick that I would say where you need to start is with your camera and your composition. Any composition that is a successful composition can then be catered and built around that camera and that composition. Because we're not going to move that camera, for example. We'll lock that camera down, and there's going to be things in the foreground. You're going to have your foreground elements. You're going to have your background elements. Those background elements, not nearly as much time and effort needs to be spent on those as the ones in the foreground. For example, a kitchen table environment scene, for example, and the kitchen table is your mid foreground element with a chandelier, or like a candelabra on it. And then in the back is a sink and a wall and a window and all sorts of cupboards and stuff like that. Well, that candelabra and that table, whatever you're putting on there is going to be your storytelling environment set piece, which needs that polish and that love. It's where your eye should go first if your composition is working. And all that shit in the background is hopefully going to be doffed out a little bit. You're going to have light screaming through that's going to be covering it. It might have a little particle dust motes and shit back there. Those things don't need to be nearly as polished as that candelabra and the things on the table, because it's not your main focal point. And it's a locked off camera shot that you're just going to do right there. So boom, there you go. Spend that time in the midground, the important things, your eyes going there. That background stuff is important. It needs to be there to make the room feel full and fill it out. Fuck, that's a tongue twister, but it needs to be there. It needs to be in the background, needs to look correct, but doesn't need to have the emphasis and the focus on that foreground piece.
Do you ever do like an analysis of like, this is really only, I don't know, 50 pixels of the final image?
Sure. Yeah. Well, see, it's hard though for video games, Finch especially. You're walking around this whole house, so you literally can go into the corner. You can hold the trigger, zoom in a little bit, and look at this little fucking teddy bear in the corner of the room that is just as in focus as the thing on the table that you're picking up and actually using. So to that extent, I take back everything that I just said for a game like Finch, where all the props in the room do need to be up to close to the same level of fidelity and detail. Yeah.
But now if we're dealing with students, is that an acceptable approach?
Exactly. And for students, I'm assuming, I mean, I back when I was teaching at Otis, I taught a couple semesters there, and getting pieces for your portfolio, to me, the still shots, ArtStation, still shots, when people are looking at your stuff, people want to hire you, we're literally pulling your thing up, we're giving you a couple minutes, and we're clicking picture, next. That's it. That first impression, those first 3 images that we look at as a group, it's not just one person either. A lot of times it's a recruiter that's going to be looking at it, but once that recruiter sends it over to the art lead or the seniors to look at and be like, hey, what do you guys think of this student or this mid-level or this senior? Well, those first 3 things that we look at is going to say a lot, and we're gonna judge the shit out of you. Unfortunately, that's just the way it works. But if that first thing that we click on captivates us, and we're like, okay, I see something that's going on here. I see where his thought is. I see where he's putting his attention to detail and his workflow. And if anything, that workflow is somewhat similar to mine, boom, automatically this person is going to be under the microscope versus, okay, this guy's got 9 things in his portfolio. They're all kind of half-assed. This one thing's cool, but the rest aren't that good. And you're flipping through these things fast. Nothing captivates you. You can't really learn a lot about this person's workflow because it's 7 or 8 things that are kind of meh. Boom, you're gone. Next, move on.
Makes sense. So is it fair to say, that how do I say this? I usually phrase it in the sense of you want to know who you're competing with. And you can be in that pool where there's like thousands of people who all can operate at the same level. And your job is to get a couple of finished pieces that are really rock solid. So you're actually competing with a much smaller pool of people.
Absolutely.
So what in your mind, it represents a finished piece, or how do you start to, like, what kind of work do you respond to that feels like it's part of your workflow? And what I'm trying to do here is I had this kind of belief, it's kind of central to me, that, that we all have these triggers. It's not about being an amazing artist, because if you're the artist, it never feels like you're amazing. So, so what are the triggers that tell HR that I'm a pro, or that I'm ready, or I'm a candidate, or something of those natures? And specifically here in environments, with your work, it's incredibly beautiful, well lit. They all look like paintings and all of that. So what are some of the triggers that you look for in people's work to say, this is somebody that is down my alley? I understand this.
I'd say there's a couple things. One big kicker is, when looking for other candidates that are professionals, a lot of times they're going to put their company brand or their company logo in the bottom corner, and you're going to pull up their page and you're going to see that they worked on Assassin's Creed. Right. You're going to see that little Assassin's Creed logo in the bottom corner. Immediately, boom, I know this guy is a professional. He's working in the industry. He's doing some shit. Boom, he goes up like immediately in my mind to a certain caliber. Students don't have that stuff going on, and they're in a different pool, right? You're not judging them the same. You're not looking at their artwork the same. But sometimes you'll find student work that is almost just as good, because I feel like those are the students that are looking at all the professionals and learning from the way that they are presenting their portfolios and the things that they are actually doing, and just trying to replicate that. The great masters in the day, they replicated and they painted over and over and over.
Yeah.
I feel it's very, very similar with environment artists now. If you're finding an artist, an environment artist that you really, really like, that has done something that really resonates with you, I wouldn't say copy it one for one, but take inspiration of that and put your own spin and flair on it and try to recreate it. Yeah, man, it's in the package. It's in the lighting. Good lighting can make a shitty model look pretty good. Vice versa, shitty lighting can make great stuff look bad. Definitely got to present your work in a way that will make it pop and make it sing. I'm a fan of always rendering out your stuff, your texture map sizes, all that stuff. Go high res with it for your portfolio and your screenshots. All professionals that are looking at candidates know that, yeah, we're not going to ship with a 2K texture map on a little soda can prop, but if everything in your scene has that, it's just going to look that much better and that much more oomph. Getting the effects in there, getting some type of particle effects, getting those little bells and whistles that just kind of mush everything together. You don't notice them, you don't see them, but you just feel that they're there. It's something that I constantly say at work and all the time with the stuff I'm working on. There's so many little things that all bring this image and bring this world to life because of these nuanced little things that you don't see unless you're actually like looking for it. But as a whole, you don't see them. It just makes everything feel, and it just brings it all together.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get that. All right. So I want to talk about the art because, I get a strong like art vibe. Like even you call yourself a digital artist, not an environment artist. So I have a feeling somewhere in here, like an incredible art form for you. But before I get into that, I kind of want to hit on the lighting conversation because that's kind of a nice segue for how we go from this, okay, I'm going to model this prop, I'm going to texture this prop. But now you talk about lighting. And so then, okay, I'm going to light it for presentation. But if I look at this stuff's like, there's in one image, I can't, which one is this? In one image, Eddie's room. No, is it Molly's room? One of these, there's this tiny bit of and don't hate me for this. There's this tiny bit of a Thomas Kincaid light, right? Like there's this soft, like Eddie's room, there's this beautiful, soft little light coming in. It's very romantic and whatnot. And then we come over here into the Finch's house, and there's more of like a Wyeth simplicity or something of that nature. But in terms of the light, how do you set these things up to be beautiful? Are you setting up, 100 different lights? Do you have like 3 lights? Are you changing the linear, the quadratic, whatever it is in terms of the decay? How are you getting this kind of natural beauty?
Yeah. So Finch was my first project in Unreal, and I had to learn how to use Unreal's lighting system, basically. And that was an adventure that I was very excited to hop on. And I want to say scared, but I wasn't really that scared because of the lighting that I had done on Blizzard and back in the day at Disney and stuff like that. I understand. Also, the reason why I call myself a digital artist is I shoot a lot of photography. I do a lot of digital work, and lighting obviously is what makes photography work. It's all about the light. It literally, ugliest subject, most beautiful lighting, you'll have a great shot as long as you can compose it well. Take that and translate that into 3D. It's about where you want to lead the eye, really. We're walking through a house, we're going from room to room. We do have this mesh text that pops up and that helps the player kind of proceed throughout the house. However, we can use lighting as pinpoints as to where to look and as to where to go. You put a dark room with a bright light shining through a window onto a sink. You walk into that room, you're probably going to go walk over to the sink and look at the sink because that's where the light is shining. So, working with design and working with creative director, we kind of ran through this game over and over and over every day for 2.5 years of what the most kind of, I don't want to say optimal, but what the most cinematic way, I guess, is to approach the house and where to look. And with that, I was able to kind of use the windows and sculpt the light throughout the windows to kind of help cater to that. In the Finch house, there is no actual light direction that is consistent. Any lighting artist that would play this game, if you walk through the house and actually study it, it makes absolutely no sense. The living room in the back has God rays and key light screaming through it, hitting the floor. And then if you look at the other side of the house, the kitchen, same thing. There's God rays and there's light angles screaming through and showcasing like the bookshelf and the bookcase and things of that nature. That's not accurate at all. That's just the way that I decided to light the room to point attention and focus as to where to go. Much like film does this all the time with their sets. They'll build their sets and they'll light up their shots catered for that shot compositionally to really understand what's going to work the best for that shot. And the same principles apply for video games. Something that's really, really fun to work on, really fun to do, because you're just working with that scene in that moment in that room to really dictate and cater to what you want the player to experience. Yeah, so getting technical a little bit with it. Yes, there were hundreds and I wouldn't say thousands, but there's hundreds of lights, a lot of point lights, a lot of fill lights, different intensities throughout each room and each window to really, like I was saying earlier, bring the player to those specific areas and have them look at and react to certain things. Big challenge was that the game, you go from day to night, and the house is traversable, obviously, as we walk up during the day, and then halfway through, you go outside, it's nighttime, you go back in the house, and it's nighttime as well. So we had to figure out, thank God, Sarf, our engineer, we worked very closely on figuring out ways to bake this entire house, interior, exterior, daytime, nighttime, and have it all work so that you don't stomp the light maps when you rebake something for daytime and for nighttime. It was a big challenge back in this time. Unreal 4.13 or whatever it was, we didn't have lighting subsets, which you have now, so that you can very easily switch your time of day lighting in that sub level. We didn't have that back then, so we had to come up with some trickery, which was kind of fun and cool. Yeah, there was no real secret sauce there other than making sure that when you're doing your test lighting, a little tip that I had was each one of these rooms had their own sub level. So Molly's room, Barbara's room, in the house, the interior, the exterior, you need to turn on the exterior of the building to actually occlude the light from, shining in when you're doing these preview bakes and these test bakes. Okay. So what I would do is I'd put the exterior of the house and the shell, all that on a sub level of the house, and then I would turn on just, Molly's room, for example, turn off all the other sub levels. Yeah. That way you can just iterate really, really quickly because you're only baking that one interior room and playing with the direction of the lights and the color and bounce intensity, et cetera, until you get something that you like. And basically I kind of do this, and we do a first pass. We do a milestone on a room. We would make the props. I was usually building the architecture, making the textures. Other artists were making props. I'd hop in there, make a couple props, and then after about a week, 2 weeks, we would start set decking it out with all our props. Then I'd do a preliminary lighting setup, kind of find the right angles of the light streaming through the window, wherever the key light was coming from. It was usually the windows. And and then we just get something pretty quick, pretty loose, pretty blocked in there. But what it did is it answered the questions of design. So you're going into this room, how are you getting into the room? What are you going to do in the room? And then how do you leave the room? And with that, we would have all the props and the storybook element things all set up to be able to come into the room, do that, and leave the room. And we do all that really quick in like I said, a couple weeks, 2 weeks. And then we move on to the next room. And then we just kind of do this room by room by room by room throughout the house. Nothing looked really that good, but it looked good enough to be able to play throughout this whole thing. And then we would start going back and then refining and adding more props, polishing textures, polishing the lighting, tweak, go back, next room, and just kind of do this back and forth and just keep doing that until we brought it up to a level of fidelity which we shipped with.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's really important to get that gameplay going, and and that's a big part of. I can imagine that's a big part of what you're doing, of course, at Giant Sparrow, because it's a small team, right? Yep. So it's like who else can do that? Is that something you deal with at Riot, or is that something where it's like other people kind of manage that and they come back with notes?
At Riot, it's weird. We have an art director now, and he's a fantastic art director, and he's very easy to work with and very enjoyable to work with. So it's a little bit different now, and it's also a much bigger team. I mean, the team of environment artists that I'm working with right now is a handful, and we have one lighter on the team. I can't really get into too much details of what we're doing and what we're working on, but the workflow that we have is more along the lines of other game development studios traditionally versus the Finch stuff was, 13 people total for the entire team, 3 artists, where 3 artists you have to do a lot. Here, everybody is a little bit more separated out to where you can have an individual person who's primarily doing lighting and that kind of stuff.
Got it. So you and I were a bit old school. Where do you see all this stuff going? Do you ever sit back and you're like, is this really what I'm doing when I'm 50? Because
Man,
you ever think about that? I was thinking about that just the other day. I was like, I don't even know what I was supposed to do at 50 because nobody does computer arts at 50, because it doesn't exist.
They're all 20. Yeah.
We're at the vanguard, for a lot of sense. So, do you ever wonder about where this goes? Do you ever get excited about VR or any of this other stuff?
Yeah, especially with the new RTX stuff, the new NVIDIA ray tracing stuff. With the new Unreal, you can now start playing around with real-time dynamic stuff. That's what I love, playing with that stuff, just to hop in there and just mess around with it, just to see what the technology does.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, when I'm 50, I personally think that those of us who have gone from college from the beginning of like the Xbox 360 days up until whatever it's going to be then, we're going to be these elders with a breadth of knowledge of game development from start to finish, and hopefully we're going to be able to teach and hold that flame of innovation from our younger days all the way to the future of what becomes of it. And as long as we're up to date, and as long as we keep on top of it and keep that mindset young to be able to continue learning, because you have to, I think we're going to be in good positions to be able to help art direct and to be able to help lead teams. And it's really understanding how the pipeline works, because I don't think that is changing. Outsourcing is something that's obviously a big thing now that a lot of studios are turning to. But if you treat your outsources as internal employees that are just cranking out props, well, then there's nothing much different than just that.
And I know they hire for outsourcing manager.
They do. Yeah.
So even though outsourcing's there, and really that just, because I train people in India and all over the place. So, it just means that it's going outside of the States or North America.
Exactly. But they're still doing the exact same things that we would be doing here.
All right. And so the key thing is pipeline and getting experience. For students who are looking to get out there, they got a lot to learn. I mean, for anybody who wants to go out there and get noticed, for example, maybe they finished college, and I always tell people, our industry doesn't care if you went to Harvard. Our industry doesn't care if you worked as George Lucas's personal assistant, right? All comes down.
It's all about your portfolio.
Yeah. So what do you recommend people? Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say, that's just half of it. Even maybe a little less than half is your portfolio, because that's what's going to get you noticed. And that's what's going to get you like, oh shit, look at this kid. He's making some dope shit. But once you come here for a meet and greet, or once you come to Riot or whatever studio for a meet and greet or for an interview, that's when we really find out who you are and what type of person you are, which is arguably more important than the work that's in your portfolio. Because if you're a fucking asshole, or if you're super cocky, or if you're whatever, you have personality things, then you're not going to get in the door, because you're not going to be able to work with these other 10 people. And that, I cannot stress enough how important that is, to stay humble, stay hungry, be that person that can't stop learning and that wants to be able to help out people in every single facet, in every which way. That's what's going to get me to be like, yep, this is the guy. He might not be the best. He might be kicking out the dopest shit in the world, but he's super humble. He's super cool. I say he, but he or she is just a fantastic person to work with. That's what I want. That's
great
what's
point.
important to me.
When I went to school, there was a hotshot guy. He actually got a lot of flack when he first started the industry, and he kind of adjusted a little bit. But, he's a real hotshot, did these really awesome projects, really rock solid, and he was like, he worked crazy hours. He was a big go-getter. He did he did stuff that we were all like, oh my God. But, he was a bit of a hotshot. There was some ego there. And, it took a little bit, a couple of kicks to the butt from the industry and people knocking it, and eventually kind of pulled in. But do you think it's important for people? Basically, what I'm trying to get to is, how do we manifest that? Is that just in the one-on-one conversations, or because the other side of this is, I ask students to go and guys go out there, create these hotshot products or go out,
Hmm.
create your own game, right?
Hmm.
Like, is that important or is the meet and greet, or you getting where I'm going with this?
Yeah, yeah. And how do you reel that in if you are an egotistical person? Or
Yeah,
you might not even know if you have an ego because in school people are coming to you all the time because you are the hot shot and they
exactly.
want to learn
Yeah.
from you. It's a very challenging one. I think a lot of it actually has to do with who you are as a person and how you were raised. Parenting has a lot to do with that. If you get spoiled as a kid, oftentimes you get everything handed to you. You go to the best schools, best colleges, make the best work, come out with everything given to you. Might be a little egotistical and just think that the world is just been handed to you to take and do what you want with it. Then
Yeah.
you step into that studio, and then there's people that just lap you and are way better than you and asking you what are you doing? Why aren't you working with the team this way and such and so forth? That's when problems are going to arise. Um,
Right. And you're
I
like,
think it's
hey, this is what I do. This is how I do it. It's better, it's better because X, Y, and Z. I've seen that
totally.
a couple of
Yep.
times. It's very
Yep.
dangerous.
It is. Yes. Yes. And I think it's just it's as that person coming out of school,
Mm,
whether or not you have an ego, just assume that you do, I guess. And when going in, just know that you're not the hot shit going in. There's other people there that have surpassed you by years of professional expertise.
You mentioned earlier you're not up to date on all the software and, all of that stuff. And,
Not designer, not substance designer. That's not my jam. I don't know about that shit. I tried it. I spent a couple hours and I'm like, and then I see the people doing some insane shit. I'm like,
right?
oh my God, how long
Yeah.
are you spending on this program? But then I think it's also, since it's node based, some people just work in node based systems extremely well.
Totally. It's
Dude,
a form of
modeling
logic.
software. Yeah, dude, it is. And if you can pick up that node base, boom, go for it. Do it. That's just not for me. Or at least I haven't put in the time to really understand that language of node based systems yet.
But it doesn't seem necessary. I mean, I'm looking at your work and it's like, well, who cares? It's
Yeah,
irrelevant. I mean, so
sure.
that's where
Yeah.
this question goes is like, is it irrelevant for people to be up and up on the latest stuff? I like to tell people that, the reason why I'm where I'm at today is because I was up and up on ZBrush like very,
When
very,
it
very
came out.
early. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that made a big impact in my life. But then I get
Yep.
pushback from people that are like, well, I want to be a sculptor. I don't want to do all this other stuff. And I get it because there's this, okay, I'm going to leverage what's out there, to help my career. Or look, I don't care about leveraging anything. I care about this
Mhm.
as an art form, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is another one of those age old questions that yes, you can just stick to sculpting and be the world's best ZBrush face sculptor. And if you are, you're going to get picked up by film companies all around the world because you make the best face or head bust sculpts, right? And that is a niche position that people will want you for. If you want to go indie and all you know how to do is sculpt faces, then you're fucked and you're not going to be able to do anything. So I wouldn't advise that if you want to do indie, but it's really what you want to do. And that boils down even nowadays to there are just primarily texture artists that do nothing but texture. If that's what you want to do, then yes, substance designer, substance painter, Photoshop, 3D code, all those things. You gotta know all that stuff. You need to know all those softwares. You gotta have exceptional painting skills. You gotta know color theory better than most people, et cetera, et cetera. But that's because you want to just be a texture artist. If you want to be a generalist, well, fuck. Now we're talking about somebody who needs to know how to model, texture, bake textures out, do a little bit of animation, maybe know how to rig some stuff up, a little bit of particle effects in there. You're a jack of all trades, but you're a master of none. That person will be very valuable in a small 10-man indie studio team, but they'll never work at Treyarch or Call of Duty as an environment artist, for example, because their skill set is not particular enough to that type of studio. And
Hmm.
film, if you want to get into film, that's a similar but even more extreme version where they have people that just model, and you don't even do your UVs. You just model the thing and throw it over the fence. Surfacing artists downstairs will take it, they'll unwrap it, they'll lay it out in multiple UV sets, they'll paint it in 3D code or substance, whatever they're using now to paint in
Hmm.
film, and then that gets passed off to lighters, and then the lighters will set it up and light it, and then the compositors will composite the lighting passes, and then the fucking editor will start. It's this crazy assembly line of niche skills.
Right.
So it's really kind of, and it's tough to say pick. you want to go to film? Do you want to go to games? Pick now what you want to do. But if you can do that and you know that that's what you want to do, like for me, I knew that I wanted to do environments. I knew that I was not going to be a character animator because I took a class and I saw people getting it, doing animation way better than me. My shit was sliding, everything was messed up, and I was just very frustrated with it. And I saw people just getting it real easy and really quick. And I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
This is not for me. I can model and texture and light better than all these people. I enjoy doing it. That's what I want to do. I just dropped animation. I dropped character, everything, and went 110% into environments and modeling, lighting, texturing. And that's what I knew that I wanted. That's what I knew I loved. That's where my passion was. If I wasn't at work getting paid doing it, I'd be at home doing it for fun. And it worked for me. And that's the one piece of advice that I can give. If you
That's
can
awesome.
find that one thing that you really, really love, go full blown and just give it your all.
Brandon, man, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And if you guys want to find Brandon online, it's artstation.com/bmart. All right, Brandon, thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate meeting you and looking at your work and getting to know, your process and your how you went through this.
For sure.
So, thank you, man.
Yeah, man. You're absolutely welcome. Tell your students if they have any specifics, hit me up. I'm approachable. I am very blunt. I'm very honest. If you want some critiques or any of that shit, I'm down. I'll tell you what I think.
All right, that sounds awesome. Thanks so much, man. Take care.
Thank you, man. Take care.
All right. So I want to thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, and for listening to this podcast. And I want to ask a couple of things from you. Number one, make sure you leave a comment or you rate this on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever it is that you're getting this. That's going to make a big difference in helping us get the word out and get people to know who we are. All right. The other thing is I want to make sure you know where to find us. So you can head over to www.gameartinstitute.com where you can learn about our flagship program, which is the Game Artist Bootcamp. This is designed for those who are really looking to move the needle on their career and really lock in that job. You may have gone to school and learned a bunch, maybe haven't learned a bunch. But at the Game Art Institute, the primary focus we have is the very specific industry skills, the triggers that you really need to hit in that job interview. What are the specific things that they're looking for? That's what we're going to be training you on. We're taking applications right now for environment artists and for character artists. So make sure you head over to www.gameartinstitute.com and apply today. That way we can have that conversation, make sure this is a fit for you, make sure that you're a fit for it, and if everything is perfect, then we will sign you up for that right away and get you into your training and start moving the needle on your career. All right? Thank you so much again for being here. Take care. Have an amazing day.